Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And today, we've got the great good fortune of welcoming back a Gaggle regular, Hans Mahncke, whom Gagglers, of course, remember him as an expert on many different things, and particularly on Russiagate and all the ins and outs of Russiagate and various prosecutions that have emerged from it. So today, I think what would be a good idea, if we have the time, is to talk, first of all, about the Mar-a-Lago situation. And then if we do have the time, then we can go on to the Igor Danchenko case, but because the trial should be starting fairly soon. So the Mar-a-Lago case, to most people, it just seems baffling because no one can quite understand what it is the government is claiming. I mean, is the issue that Trump had classified document? Is the issue that Trump had presidential documents and he shouldn't have had any document? Is the issue that Trump had somehow not cooperated with the National Archives and he'd sort of been misleading the National Archives? And all of it is very, very puzzling because he was the president. He is entitled to his presidential documents. He's entitled to declassify whatever he wants. And how come Barack Obama has millions upon millions of presidential documents? He can do that, you know. And then Hillary Clinton, she had her own homebrew server, classified emails. She destroyed 30,000 emails. Yeah, that was all fine. So I think people are wondering, what the hell is this about? You know, what is it Trump is supposed to have done? So anyway, what do you think, Hans?
No, that's exactly right. And it's all of the above, and that's the problem. There's just so much going on, and it's a huge mess. Maybe we'll just start at the top in terms of a quick timeline here that might make it a bit clearer as to where we are now. So in January, the National Archives asked Trump to return documents that he had that belonged in the National Archives. So these would be presidential records. Now, I think that's where the first mistake was made. Why did he cooperate? He should have just said, you know, take a running jump. I don't have anything that is of any interest to you. This is my stuff. Go away. But he didn't do that. He cooperated, or at least pretended to cooperate. I don't know which it is. And he returned 15 boxes of stuff. Unfortunately, that then triggered and the next thing, because within those 15 boxes of stuff, there were allegedly torn up papers, and they were allegedly classified marked papers, and allegedly other things which he shouldn't have had. And that's aside from returning stuff to the National Archives. So that's one thing. But what they found in the boxes is stuff that he just shouldn't have had at all. You know, never mind whether he should return it or not, he should never, ever have it. That's at least that's what the National Archives thought. So the National Archives complained to the FBI, DOJ, like, oh, look, this guy gave us boxes and he had stuff that he wasn't supposed to have. Then the question arose of executive privilege. That comes up a lot. Oh, what about that? Well, that's kind of a sideshow, but essentially when you're dealing with these things, you always, on the government side, they wanted to be kind of careful to tick their boxes. So they were like, well, how do we deal with that? What if there's executive privilege? What if he claims executive privilege, whatever? So Biden took that away. I think it was in April. It was like, well, we'll just cancel that. So now the National Archives.
He attempted to, right? I mean, he wanted to do it, but he wasn't enforced.
Well, he gave the authority to the archivists. It's like, you sort it out.
Okay, so it's legal veracity is up in the air.
No, that's correct. Yeah, that's right. Whether he could, that's true, but he purported to anyway. And that then allowed the National Archives, well, they could have done that before, but they just wanted to be sort of doubly sure, to give the whole bunch of stuff that they had that they thought Trump shouldn't have had to the FBI. Like, look, there you go. There you have it.
Just go step back a bit. Why does the National Archives say that he shouldn't have that? Because, I mean, doesn't the president have these documents? I mean, you know, this is all going to be housed in the Trump presidential library. Right. So it's hard to understand, where does the National Archives get off saying you're not supposed to have these documents? I mean, they are the presidential documents, and they are going to be part of the Trump presidential library.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Well, the irony here is that there were two people involved with the archives. So the archivist at the time in January, and then the new archivist. And the original guy apparently hates Trump, and there's all kinds of data points that show that he just doesn't like Trump. So yeah, I completely agree with you. What's it got to do with him? I mean, he should just archive the stuff and be done with it. But he was looking for stuff to go after Trump. And then then a lady took over in April, and Deborah Seidel, and she decided to, really push this. The irony is that so often with Trump, there's videos of him praising her. Like, oh, she's the greatest archivist and so on. So we've become used to that. But okay, so there's a very good question. I think it's personal. I just think these people were out to get Trump, as many of these bureaucrats are. But it's like, oh, look, we got 15 boxes. Let's see if we can find a hair in the ointment here. Let's see if we can find something to get him on. And DOJ was very happy to run with it. So what they then did is, oh my goodness, there were these classified marked documents in those boxes. Okay, we better impanel a grand jury. That was in April. And then the grand jury decided to issue the subpoena. And then the subpoena was served in the beginning of June. And the subpoena, the subpoena, I think, is a trap, or was a trap, and the trap sprung successfully. The subpoena is very carefully worded, and I don't think these Trump lawyers read it properly, or they did read it properly and tried to play games. What the subpoena says is, you need to hand over any documents in your possession that are marked classified. So immediately they took out of the equation whether or not they are classified. Doesn't matter. As long as it has the word classified on it, you have to hand it over. And it is a grand jury subpoena.
But if just so I understand here, if it has the classification, classified, top secret, whatever, but like a magic wand, Trump can say declassified, okay? Though it still has the imprint. I mean, I don't, that's part of the story that I don't understand, because he can say, and it's very, very clear, because and it's been litigated, he can just say it. He doesn't have to go to the archivist. He doesn't have to go to a notary, nothing. He has the sole power to do it, declassified. So how do you square that in all of this?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I think, first of all, in order to avoid those problems, because DOJ knew that might be a problem. In order to avoid that, they phrased the grand jury subpoena in a way where it just didn't matter. The grand jury subpoena does not, I think this is what 99% of the media have just totally missed. The grand jury subpoena does not seek classified documents, full stop. It's got nothing to do with classified documents, whether they're classified or not, absolutely nothing to do with it. It only seeks documents that happen to have the label classified written somewhere. That's it. So of course that's overly broad, that's ridiculous. But what should have happened at the time, if his lawyers had paid attention, and again, I think it was a trap, they should have objected. They should have said, you can't come and seek anything that has these words on them. He declassified everything, or, this is overly broad, or, whatever. Just try and object legally, go against that legally. And, if you get a good judge, you got a good chance of getting somewhere with that. But they didn't do that. So just as in January, when they purported to cooperate, oh, you want stuff? Okay, fine, here's some boxes. They did exactly the same again. Oh, grand jury wants some stuff. Okay, here's some boxes. So they handed over another bunch of boxes. And I think that's when the trap was sprung. And to make things worse, one of the lawyers then signed a certification, which is basically like an affirmation under oath, that said, we've now handed over everything that the grand jury asked for. And remember, the grand jury didn't ask for classified stuff, so that's not an excuse. Just stuff that happens to have the word classified written on it. Okay.
I used to be a university lecturer, and I always would say there are no dumb questions, so I'm going to apply it to myself. So, I mean, you can have a folder that says classified, and there's nothing in the folder, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, from what I understand, or maybe I'm being misled, but the way it was framed, that anything, I mean, if you have a manila folder that says classified, then there's this tainting process where anything near it, anything that touches it, okay? It's kind of like, getting a Pfizer wiretap. If when Carter Page called someone, that person is in the net, and then anyone that person called, and it goes like that. It seems to me that was kind of it. And another thing is, I hope this is not a stupid question. What is it with 15 boxes? Didn't that administration generate millions and millions and millions of documents? What's the 15? I mean, my sense is, it's all the times Trump was on the cover of Time, or all the political cartoons in the Washington Post. I mean, he's the type of guy that would do it. I've seen footage when he was running in his office, in his in Manhattan office. It is, the whole place is full of Trump memorabilia on his desk. Everything is Trump, 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 Trump. I mean, we all know the man has an ego, but it seems to me that that's 15 boxes of "I was president."
No, I completely agree. I think my overarching theory of the whole thing is that all of this stuff was just memorabilia. That's it.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, the entire volume is like 10,000 documents or 10,000 papers. I don't know which one of those two it is, but that's nothing if you're going to build a giant library or whatever. It's got nothing to do with those things.
Yeah, it's 11,000 documents, and then I think it was only 100 that had classified markings. So that's less than 1%. So therefore, just that, that's what it was, just less than 1%. But again,
right, so
11,000 is nothing. How was it 30 million that Obama has in his
right,
that he promises to digitize, and he hasn't digitized anything?
Exactly. So I think it was just memorabilia, but he just handled it stupidly on so many levels. I mean, we can come back to what he should have done back in 2020, 2021, January, and so on. But I mean, just to stay on this timeline. So in early June, they hand over an extra, whatever, how many boxes. And they're like, okay, now this is it. And then stupidly, the lawyer signed this piece of paper that said, we have now handed over everything that the grand jury asked for. Now, this is where the trap sprung, because someone then told the FBI that's not true, because I saw on his desk, I saw in his drawer, I saw wherever a document that had top classified, top secret written on it. And that's this confidential human source. Now, the DOJ filed something yesterday to try and fight back on the special master case, which I haven't talked about yet. Anyway, the interesting part of that was that they mentioned that they interviewed some housekeepers, some maids and people like that. That it says that there. So immediately I was like, that's probably where you got someone who told you, oh, there was something that had top secret and it was lying around on his desk or whatever.
A housekeeper, a cleaning woman. Oh,
it literally said they interviewed housekeepers.
The pool guy. The pool guy.
The pool guy saw something top secret. Yeah. So that's when they, as you said, George, I mean, this is less than 1%. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to return everything. There's always going to miss something, especially with those kinds of numbers. So that's where the trap is. But then what you do as a lawyer, when you certify that, you don't say you returned everything. You build in a whole bunch of qualifications. Like there could still be stuff, and you just put in a couple sentences in there as to why this might not be everything. And they just didn't do that. I mean, that certification is just terrible. It's absolutely terrible in terms of how.
But that means it's the person who's certified who's on the hook. It's not Trump. I mean, Trump isn't the one who did the certifying. So it's
correct. So it's the person who certified it, right? So I have no doubt whatsoever that either they have already interviewed that person or they will, and they will exert some pressure, and they will say, who told you to sign this? Because it does say, the search was conducted by so-and-so, and I'm told that everything was there. So the lawyer also, I mean, the lawyer builds in a little bit of sort of deniability for herself, because she says, someone told me, but everything has been returned. So they're going to ask, oh, who's that someone? Who told you that? Did anyone tell you to lie? Did anyone prevent you from looking? Why didn't you go and look yourself? You're a lawyer. By the way, you as a lawyer, you never, ever, 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 ever attest to anything unless you have seen it yourself. You just don't do it. You say, you tell me to say something about those boxes, show me the boxes. I mean, it's just common sense. And she didn't do that. So
do we know who this person is?
Well, the New York Times says she's Christina Bobb, one of the lawyers that we see on TV.
Yeah, she's one of those who appears on TV. I've seen
right.
her.
I mean, I haven't confirmed that, but anyway, for what it's worth, New York Times says it's her, and she has been sort of rather quiet on TV in the past few weeks. So who knows? But yeah, they're going to squeeze her. and they're going to try and find out what sort of games were being played in the background, if any games were being played. So then that leaves us two options. Either this is total incompetence, which is with Trump very likely, or it was some kind of sneaky job where they were trying to withhold documents and try to whatever, get this lawyer to sign something and later blame her, or whatever. So I don't even know if it's 50-50. I don't even want to give it percentages, but it's one of those two options.
What I think is very interesting and actually deviously clever, given even what we've said here among ourselves, is that on one level, it's just a document dispute, okay? But what the talking heads on TV have done, and the New York Times, Washington Post, etc., is it made it confusing, very difficult to kind of understand. You're a smart guy. I'm understanding exactly what you're saying because you speak in simple sentences for me. But it's intentionally making it very, very murky. What is executive privilege and who can declassify, and in a broad search warrant and all. I mean, this is stuff most people don't know. I mean, you might have heard it on Perry Mason, but it's very distant. Also, I think what's very, very important is the optics of it, raiding Mar-a-Lago. I think that was so important for them to do that, okay? Because somehow legitimizes the case, that this is a criminal on the run. He's a pathological liar. He's doing it for greed and all. I mean, I was on vacation. I was in Irkutsk. I mean, halfway around the world, and I literally just was in shock. I decided, what happened? Fox News turned into The Onion. This can't be real. And I think the optics of it here and purposely making it confusing is all on purpose.
Right, and that's why it's so strange, because then you have somebody like Mike Davis who points out, well, there's no way that a president can violate the Espionage Act because he has the absolute power to declassify anything he wants. And then the argument shifts. Oh, well, it's nothing to do with that. It's all about the documents. I mean, he's not supposed to have these documents. It doesn't matter whether they classified this, they classified, he was not supposed to hold on to these documents. But the Presidential Records Act, it's not a criminal statute. So, even if it's not, it's like a library books. I mean, you have the library books. I mean, you're supposed to return them. So it's not a criminal statute. Oh, well, it's all about his lying to the archives. And that's why, as you said, Peter, it's very confusing because the argument keeps shifting. And one thing everyone's agreed on is he should be in prison. He has to be arrested right now and led away in leg irons.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. You're right that there's a lot of this is done for PR. Not only not going to raid Mar-a-Lago, but also he had top secret documents, the photo of all these documents on the floor, which of course he didn't have them on the floor. The FBI put them there. Yes, a lot of PR going on here, but there's also kind of some subterfuge, some kind of deflection going on, because with all this talk about classified and executive privilege and presidential records and so on, none of that matters. This is all just a decoy. The only thing that will matter in the end is the one we just talked about, the obstruction trap. And the obstruction trap is obstructing the grand jury by not returning all the documents that are labeled classified. It's so simple, but that's all that it comes down to. And we have more proof of that in the same filing I talked about a moment ago, yesterday's filing. So Trump, after all this happened, Trump applied for a special master and got it. What it means is that a special master is just a guy who helps the court look at everything that was seized and just kind of categorize it. Okay, this goes in this bunch, this goes in that bunch, so that the court just verifies that the FBI isn't playing games here. These documents are such and such. It's a pretty mundane kind of task. They did that with Rudy Giuliani when they raided him. They did that with Michael Cohen when they raided him. I don't know why the DOJ just didn't do it with Trump as well. I mean, it really doesn't make a difference. You get some neutral guy who just puts things in boxes. If the stuff was there and to begin with, if they haven't planted it or whatever, there's no reason not to do that. So Trump got that, and now that's going to delay the process, because now a special master has to look at these 11,000 documents that you talked about and just say, okay, this goes there, and so on. Now, yesterday, the DOJ filed to get rid of the special master, but if you read very carefully, they only want to get rid of the special master in respect of one thing: documents marked classified. They concede all the other stuff. They said, we don't care about presidential records. We don't care about executive privilege. We don't care about any of those things. Special master can to his heart's content, can look at it, can do whatever. We don't care. It's just the classified, no, not the classified, the documents marked classified. That's the only stuff we care about. And we don't want the special master to look at those, because those have nothing to do with special master and then come up with all these legal arguments. But anyway, the point is, why are they only concerned about that? Because they're only concerned about the obstruction trap, the perjury, that the lawyer signed this paper, that they handed everything over. That's what it all comes down to. All this other stuff is just a kind of a decoy to keep the media busy, to keep the public, outraged and so on.
Okay, so the jurisdiction is DC, right?
It could be Florida, but yeah, I mean, it's probably DC.
Well, it's pretty important because, okay, I'll just jump to my question. Will he be indicted?
So in terms of the jurisdiction, it's like there's always, you can always argue one way or the other or whatever, but I think it just could be both. DOJ can choose. And obviously they would choose DC. I don't know. I mean, everyone kind of seems to jump on this sort of, yeah, he's going to be indicted. I think it depends entirely on what Christina Bobb, or whoever that lawyer was, tells them. If she says, no, this was all entirely my fault. I'm the world's worst lawyer. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to lose my license, which she will if she says those things. But I just signed that. I didn't really, if she takes it on her, then maybe not. But if she says anything else, if she says, no, this other lawyer told me to do this, they told me it's fine, they told me, they kind of fobbed me off, and if she says anything like that, or worse, like, no, they didn't want to hand this over and we had this plan or whatever, there's a whole spectrum of things she could say. But if it's anything other than it's entirely my fault, no one else was involved, this is only me, if it's anything else, I think he will be indicted.
But how can a lawyer shift blame onto the client? I mean, the point is the lawyer is the one with the expertise. The person with the expertise can't shift responsibility to the person without the expertise, because, I mean, you as a client have a defense saying, hey, this is what my lawyer advised me. But a lawyer can't very well say, well, I was just doing what my client told me to do. I mean, that's no defense for a lawyer.
Well, it depends on what kind of lawyer, and depends on how they structure their little, their games, I would call them, because here's something we haven't talked about yet, which is going to be a big problem for Trump. 4 days before the grand jury subpoena, so also in May of this year, there was another subpoena to do with this New York case. There's a separate case. Letitia James up there, the Attorney General, is pursuing Trump on civil charges to do with his company. So they also had a subpoena, and they also needed to search Mar-a-Lago for documents, and they also needed to sign a certification. And if you compare those two certifications 4 days apart, right? One says signed by another lawyer, Alina Habba, not Christina Bobb. So the first one is signed by, the one for New York is signed by Alina Habba. So she goes, I went through this room, this room, this room. I went through this drawer, this drawer, this drawer. I checked this. I mean, it's very detailed. It says everything she did. And I confirmed that I found no responsive documents. Now, of course, she wasn't looking for classified documents. She was looking for Trump Organization documents. But she would have, well, she already did the search in the same locations, his office and so on. So why wouldn't they 4 days later use the same lawyer? Oh, you already did the search. Why didn't you just sign that, well, they didn't. They used a different lawyer. So that in itself is already kind of a bit suspicious. And also just the form of it. Why does one lawyer detail exactly, what was done and where she looked and so on? And the other lawyer just said, no, we returned everything. It seems to me that this second lawyer was just literally brought in at the last minute to sign the piece of paper.
Oh my God. Trump doesn't have, just like during his administration, he surrounded himself by people that worked against him, and it looks like he has incompetence. The reason why I asked you the question, will he be indicted? I will contend is that they started down this path. They started this gambit with the absolute intention of doing it. Come hell or high water, it doesn't matter. They're going to do it, okay? No matter how flimsy it is, how poorly thought out their side was. George, you're enlightening George and I and our viewers here about the caliber of lawyers that Trump has, but they would not have done this. They would not have done this without the absolute intention of indictment, hell or high water.
No, I agree. And if it's not this, if Christina Bobb takes everything on herself, they're going to find something else. I agree with you. They'll just go somewhere else. But I would also add that if Trump had hired proper lawyers from the get-go on all these issues, he wouldn't be in this mess. And by the way, that goes back to January of 2021, when he was still president. Why didn't he do what Susan Rice did? We all remember Susan Rice on her last day in office, 2017, wrote a note to myself. We did everything properly. We gave everything back. We did, we handed everything over. So
everything must be done by the book. And he kept
by the book,
everything must be done by the book.
Or why didn't Trump do that and write every box that's now going to Mar-a-Lago is my own personal stuff, and it's all declassified hereby, president, boom, done. He didn't do that. Instead, they had, this declassification, we already discussed why it doesn't matter in terms of this grand jury subpoena. It's completely irrelevant. But let's say they find some other issue that they want to charge him with on declassification. Well, there are so many different excuses he's put forward. Oh, I declassified by Twitter in October of 2020. Well, you go and look what happened there. Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, walked it back the next day. He's like, no, he didn't mean that. Or you look at the declassification in January of 2021. There's like, I declassify all this Russiagate stuff. Mark Meadows, a day later, writes a paper. No, we didn't mean that. The FBI has reasons to withhold, and this is fine. They should withhold, and this is for equities and whatever, all this kind of stuff. So there isn't a single piece of paper anywhere that I've seen which says I've just declassified, full stop. So that's going to be a problem in itself if they come at him for that. So those are the problems while he was still president, that he surrounded himself with like yes men like Meadows and whatever, and then no one ever got it done. If you have smart people, you can get it done. You can get this stuff out. As you say, he's got all these prerogatives, presidential records, executive privilege, declassification. Just use them all, very simple terms, write a memo and you're done. And none of that was done. And then afterwards, he surrounded himself with these what do I call them without being mean? They're
pretty girls. They're pretty. They're nice to look at.
Yeah.
Well, his lawyers on TV are pretty. That's for sure.
Well, I think that some of them are.
I think that's where he found them, isn't it?
And I think that was, you have to say Trump chose personnel badly, but he's somebody who's very prone to picking attractive women because they're nice to look at. And all of those attractive women did him in. They to a woman, they absolutely destroyed him.
There's been some speculation. Again, I don't know if this is just muddying the waters, but I have come across the theory that the Crossfire Hurricane documents might have been in Mar-a-Lago. Have you followed up on that or heard that? Because that's something Fox News might want to inject, to spin the story their ways. I always be very careful about that. What do you think the possibility of that is? Because that was the great thorn that really slowed down his administration. If I were Trump, I would have at least let me read the stuff. Okay, I'll declassify it again because there's so many conflicting views on what that means. Do you think that he might have had those documents?
It's a really good question. I think Trump just is not a details person. I think he just simply doesn't appreciate what he might have had or how important it might have been or whatever. If you told him like, oh, I need the original Christopher Steele interview, or I need the unredacted Carter Page FISA from June, or whatever, it's just like, what? I don't think he has any granular understanding of any of these things. Of course, he had an interest to keep this stuff, like to have this stuff. He should have, if he did, he should have released it. That's the first thing I would say. And
why? Do you know why he didn't do that? Why didn't he release it? He had a number of opportunities and he didn't do it. You remember the British and the Australians don't want this released, and why would he defer to the British and the Australians? What have they done for him?
Well, exactly. Or why did he declassify everything right on his the last day or the second last day of his administration, and then Meadows comes in and walks it all back again? Why does that keep happening? Maybe there's threats. Why didn't he pardon Julian Assange? There's all kinds of stories as to he was threatened or whatever. I remember saying at the time, It doesn't matter. They're going to come after you anyway.
Anyway, you're right. George and I were saying that.
Right.
George and I were saying that it doesn't matter. They're going to hate him anyway.
That's right. But there was a real danger. I mean, on the Assange thing, there was a danger that he would be convicted. I mean, it was only 10 votes. He only escaped conviction by 10 votes. If Lindsey Graham and a few others had joined, I mean, I think Lindsey Graham did threaten him that if you pardon Julian Assange, then, you know, I will vote to convict. So if you go Graham, few others, he would have been convicted. So
and maybe that applies to these Russiagate documents in some way as well. But someone has them. I mean, it's back to Peter's question. Someone definitely has them because they had them in the White House on January 19th, 2021. Then they returned them. It was when Meadows went, groveling. Oh, sorry, yeah, the FBI has good reasons to withhold. Okay, here they are, return them. I mean, I would bet a lot of money that they didn't return them without keeping a copy somewhere. This is this binder that they always talk about. So were they part of the Mar-a-Lago documents? We just don't know. I mean, we just don't know one way or the other. It's possible, it's likely. I think it's more likely that Meadows kept a copy. Like Mark Meadows personally has a copy somewhere. I would say that's more likely than them being at Mar-a-Lago. So I don't know. Well, if he did have them, I would be extremely annoyed that he didn't share them with, people like myself who spent a lot of time kind of unraveling this whole mess to his benefit.
What about John Solomon? Isn't John Solomon, wasn't he one of the people that was in charge of these documents? Solomon
Yeah,
and
this is, again, Trump's sort of personnel choices or whatever you want to call it. So John Solomon released what looks like one of these documents on January 21st or so, like Biden's first day in office, which would suggest that someone gave Solomon a copy from this binder of at least either the whole thing, but at least one document. And then he just kind of stopped, maybe because he doesn't have any, or maybe because he was told to stop, or maybe because he was threatened, or, who knows. But in as far as he's involved in this, or in as far as he got documents maybe which he shouldn't have had because they weren't properly declassified, again, I'm not doubting Trump's authority as president. I'm doubting that he did declassify them because Meadows wrote in his memo that the FBI has good reasons not to declassify. So, you just can't have it both ways. But the thing that Trump then did in January of this year is he nominated Solomon as his representative with the National Archives. And why would you do that? I mean, even if Solomon is the nicest man in the world, his hands are tainted. They're going to come after you just because it's Solomon. Just pick anyone, open a phone book and pick anyone else, but not him. Not because he's a bad guy or whatever, just because he's already tainted. He already had documents which are suspected of having been leaked. Just don't do that, So I don't know what's going on there.
All right. Do you want to move on to the Igor Danchenko case? So just as a reminder to Gaggler's, Igor Danchenko was the person that Christopher Steele, in his notorious dossier, the one that Steele named as his chief source for the dossier. Danchenko had been introduced to Steele by Fiona Hill, who always seems to be popping up, and because she was also in the Alpha Bank case as well. She kind of popped up there, and of course she popped up in impeachment 1. So anyway, Danchenko was indicted by Durham, essentially for giving false statements. I think every single charge is about giving false statements. And now Danchenko's lawyers have filed a motion to have the case dismissed. As far as I understand, the basis is that if Mueller didn't find that he had done anything wrong, then there's clearly Danchenko hadn't done anything wrong. So, what is going on now in the Danchenko case?
No, that's correct. So Danchenko has 5 charges of lying to the FBI. Now, each of those is fairly obvious. It's fairly obvious that he did lie, and we don't have to get into the details. But he was interviewed in January of 2017 when the FBI found out that he was the supposed super source who gave Christopher Steele all this stuff. And, we all remember that during the interview, we found that out in 2020, during the interview, he basically disavowed the dossier. No, this is just gossip. These are just friends of mine who said that. And, he basically dismissed the whole thing. Anyway, while he was dismissing it, he did, engage in a bit of lying where he kind of bent things here and there to basically to minimize his own involvement with the dossier, to make himself look better. That's, to me, the most plausible explanation why he would have lied about this and that. I mean, relatively small lies. So for instance, one of the lies is about Charles Dolan, this Clinton associate.
Yes,
and
he's the person who's also involved with Fiona Hill. Fiona Hill is also
yes,
involved.
That's right. And so Charles Dolan is a friend of Danchenko, another weird friend to have for someone who was this dossier super source. I mean, Charles Dolan and the Clintons go back to the early 90s. He was involved with all the Clinton campaigns, Bill and Hillary, and so on. So anyway, he was feeding Danchenko stories for the dossier. That's unambiguous because emails from Dolan to Danchenko, the language then is mirrored in the dossier like a few weeks later. You can just compare. It's unambiguous. So did Dolan do that on purpose or not? We don't know. But it doesn't matter for the case because what Danchenko was asked by the FBI is, do you know this guy, Charles Dolan? And he goes, yeah, I do. So he admits that. Did he give you anything for the dossier? No. Is there anything in the dossier from Dolan? No. So that's a lie. That's a pretty clear lie. Okay, so he did lie, but now his lawyers are arguing, well, they're not admitting he lied, but they're kind of saying that's not even important. What we're arguing is that in order to be convicted of a lie, there needs to be something called materiality. And materiality in a nutshell just means it's capable of influencing the FBI, the person you're talking to, the government body you're talking to. So you can lie about, the car was red or the car was black or whatever. If it's irrelevant, it's not a lie for legal purposes. But if it's relevant, then it is. So in this case, the question is, did Danchenko's lies influence, or the technical term is, were they capable of influencing the FBI? That's the exact term used. And the lawyers are arguing, I think very cogently, that no, they were not capable of influencing the FBI because they were dead set on getting Trump. It didn't matter what Danchenko told them. I mean, and then the lawyers point out, our client told you guys that this is all rumors, this bar talk is not to be taken seriously, but you still forged on. You still went on to get Mueller and do all these things to try and get Trump. So it didn't matter what our client told you, you would have done whatever you were going to do anyway. So I think that's a really good argument. And that gives Durham a lot of problems next month at the trial.
Yeah, because they just wanted to create a predicate. We got the predicate, thanks, bye, move on.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but I mean, this is something I remember when we last spoke, and we were discussing the issue of why Durham has decided to push his investigation in the strange direction of making the FBI a kind of the victim. Somehow the terrible people that were deceiving the FBI, that they were doing some honest investigation, and whether it was Sussman or and then Danchenko, they were just lying to the FBI. And it was, I mean, basically, I think we agreed that that's Durham's job. Durham's job is to do cleanup for the establishment, is there to rehabilitate the FBI and therefore not throw under the bus, a figure like Danchenko, who's a Russian. And so, why not shove him under the bus?
Yeah, no, that's right. But even that, he's not doing that very well. So, I mean, such a simple task, and he's not doing it well. So, for instance, Danchenko also lied about his contacts with Russian intelligence. Now, a lot of people conflate that with the Russians feeding him stuff for the dossier. There's absolutely no evidence of that. He was friends with FSB folks back in 2009, 2010. He was trying to apparently recruit people at Brookings, where he worked at the time, for the FSB. So those are very, very bad things. And then he left the country, and no one knows why he came back and how he came back, and no one really knows any of those things. But those things happened, and that's been filed in various court documents. So, skip forward a few years. Here's this guy, he's back in the US, and now he's giving Christopher Steele these stories. And so people said, oh, he's probably being fed by FSB. Again, there's absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever. So just wanted to make that clear from the get-go. But it still remains that when he was interviewed by the FBI in 2017, he said, no, he never met anyone from the FSB. He never knew anyone from, he knew no Russian intelligence officials ever, and so on. He was very adamant about that. And those are clearly lies. And the FBI knew them to be lies because they were investigating him for these contacts and for trying to recruit Brookings Institution people a few years earlier. So why didn't Durham charge him with that? Or why didn't Durham just go there and say, just charge him with espionage, just charge him with being a foreign spy, and you're going to go to life, you go to prison for life. That's so much leverage. At that point, he can have him in a room and say, okay, Igor, now you really tell me what happened. Now tell me exactly what Steele said. Tell me, if you don't want to go to prison for a very, very long time, you tell me all these things. Durham didn't do any of that.
Well, let's ask the obvious question. Why aren't they doing that?
Yep. And I think it's what George said. I mean, it's kind of basically a cover-up. It's sort of feed us, throw us a bit of, food, like, oh, here you go, a bit of red meat. Look, there's this Igor, we're going to prosecute him. Now everyone shut up and, move on.
It reminds me of the Maxwell trial, the Epstein trial, Giselle, whatever, how you pronounce her name. They did such a skinny prosecution just to get something to stick. Never mind the other decades of malfeasance. Okay, it sounds very similar to, it's a very, very thin thing that they want to go after, and because it would unravel so many other things that people would have to be held account for, as you've just explained.
Right, exactly.
But was it?
And,
is it yeah, no,
sorry.
sorry. Yeah. No, I mean, I was just going to go off on a little bit. I mean, was it ever possible for Durham to pursue the FBI? In other words, let's say, Durham was courageous and had ideas other than just simply rehabilitation with the FBI. Do you think there was ever a possibility of bringing criminal charges against somebody like Peter Strzok and Page and McCabe? What is there? Do you think there's a case that they could have been brought against them?
Absolutely, against all of them. I mean, let's look at Comey, for instance. Igor Danchenko told these investigators on January 25th, of 2017, that the dossier was just kind of rumor and gossip and so on. We also found out through this filing that you mentioned that he gave them emails. So on January 25th, 2017, Igor Danchenko gave the FBI emails that proved that the dossier just couldn't be true because the timelines didn't fit, everything was just wrong. So they knew. So a few days later, Comey went to his infamous dinner with Trump at the White House. And at that dinner, Trump said, look, this dossier is ridiculous. Please do something to just disprove it, get rid of it, just investigate it. So he asked Comey to investigate it. And Comey didn't tell him that it was being investigated. And worse, he didn't tell Trump that it had already been debunked. He told him the opposite. So then skip forward to March of 2021, Comey went to Congress and said, we're investigating a Trump campaign for collusion with Russia. He knew it was all bunk. He knew because Danchenko had said there's no basis for it. Everything had fallen apart. So there's many lies like that you can trace where you go against Comey for lying to the president, for lying to Congress. I mean, it's the same charge, right? You can do the same for Strzok, who kept, who knew the whole thing was bunk, but then he just kept going on. You got these two agents, Thibault and Outen, that we've heard a lot recently. Outen was the interviewer of Danchenko in January of 2017. Why didn't he pipe up? He knew what Danchenko said. He was in the room. Why didn't he say like, hey guys, we can't really go on with this? But no, he escalated it. And then we got Mueller, and then we got inquiries and the Senate inquiry, and on and on and on. So if Durham had really wanted to go after these people at the FBI, he could have done all those things. But guess what? A lot of the evidence I just mentioned, the email, the parts of the Danchenko interview, all that kind of stuff, that came out recently in the past few weeks and months. It all came out after March of this year. Guess what March of this year is? March of this year was the 5-year deadline for most of these crimes. Yeah. So 5 years, statute of limitations, you cannot charge it anymore. So once we hit that deadline, suddenly Durham goes, oh, look at these documents, look at that. And, so no, he just, I don't know what it is. I mean, you said, is it on purpose? Is it because he had his hands tied? Whatever. We don't know what it is. I hope one day he's going to be honest enough to come out and say, look, they told me I could only go after private actors. They told me the FBI is off limits. I don't think he will, but I hope he does.
Yeah, well, the power protects power. I don't think we'll ever get a cleaning out of Maine justice. Okay, there's just too many people back, protecting others and themselves, obviously. And then we going back to what we had with the Mar-a-Lago raid. I mean, it just reinforces it. Okay, a lot of these are the same people involved. Okay, they're never going to be investigated. They're never going to talk. Be a whistleblower against one of the others. It's really, really pathetic. It's so frustrating when I look at the work that you've done over the years. You have all the right questions and nobody wants to answer them.
Right. And I think it's also interesting. I mean, when was it that Bill Barr said, oh, he doesn't think that Obama and Biden will be indicted over in Durham's investigation, which of course essentially was pretty much telling Durham which direction you want to go, because how could Barr make any kind of determination whether Obama and Biden were not culpable? In fact, we know Obama and Biden were culpable. We know they were in that meeting on January the 5th when they cooked up that whole thing is, let's go after Flynn on the Logan Act and the rest of it. So for Barr to just make this announcement was already pretty much giving a clear direction as to which way Durham has to go.
No, that's right. That was in May or June of 2020, and but I'm sure he privately told Durham already where he's supposed to go with that. As far as Obama is concerned, there's also July of 2016 when Obama was told that Hillary Clinton had a plan to vilify Trump with this false Russia collusion narrative. Literally those words I just used. Obama was told that. Well, then maybe Obama should have called it off and said, hey, we're not going to do that under my watch. We're not going to investigate the political opponent when I know that it's Hillary who's behind it, because I've been told that by the CIA. So let's not do that. And he didn't do that.
And on top of it, in the waning days of his administration, he allowed, I don't know how many thousands of other people access to highly classified information so they could give it away, leak it to the media left and right, which they did. I mean, what was it? I don't know who came up with it. It was like 5 major leaks a day for months on end. It just was, and it was those people. And we had that, what's that woman's name, George, that ran for Congress in law?
Oh, that was the one with the Hungarian ancestry.
Farkas.
Farkas.
Yeah.
He said it live on television,
Yes,
exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. No, that's right. But again, it's sort of interesting because that in a sense was the role of Bill Barr. I mean, Bill Barr was essentially, hey, how do I rehabilitate the establishment which has so discredited itself through Russiagate? And everything he did was just that. He appointed Durham. And all of his statements, such as this one with the Obama, and the fact that he essentially knew all about the Hunter Biden laptops and from 2019 on. He made no mention of that, even when all the nonsense came out, all the allegations in October 2020. Oh, this is Russian disinformation. He said nothing. Kept his mouth shut about that, though then he shut his mouth off about the election. Oh, I've seen no evidence of widespread election fraud. So sometimes he shoots his mouth off of like the election fraud or about Obama and Biden. And then at other times, he's mute. He had nothing to say about the Hunter Biden laptop.
I think Barr kind of turned at some point. And well, his book kind of details, he doesn't really make a secret of it. I think we have to give him credit for shutting down the Mueller investigation. I mean, that was a good thing he did. And it took a lot of very clever moves on his part to get that done. I mean, he kind of played chess against Mueller and his people, and he won at every turn, not only shutting it down, but getting the documents out and getting the redactions off and, all this kind of stuff. Great. But then, and he describes this in his book, he was very angry that once the whole thing was actually done and dusted, which was on July 24th, 2019, when Mueller went to Congress and made a total fool of himself, And everyone knew, oh my goodness, that guy is completely senile. He had nothing to do with any of this. And it was these Democrat lawyers who were just kind of persecuting Trump. And this was a great moment for Trump. It was all there, it was all obvious. Well, guess what happened the next day? The very next day was the Zelensky call. And that this is what Barr talks about in his book, that he was extremely angry that just Trump having dealt with this 3-4-year-old problem, and Barr having helped him get rid of it, and it's done and dusted. And within 12 hours, Trump just steps into a new problem. And of course, we can argue about whether what he said was impeachable. I don't think so, but it wasn't smart. I mean, that's for sure. You got 30 people on the line. You got the sort of what's his name? That's the Vindman character, and all these people are listening on the line, and you're talking about Biden and investigating. It just, Anyway, so Barr was very annoyed about that. And then he described in his book that, it's like every week he was annoyed about something else to do with Trump. He was extremely annoyed about the COVID stuff. Barr was actually like a non-alarmist, like let's get on with life. And he felt that Trump was actually being very alarmist. Barr was very upset about these press conferences, these endlessly meandering press conferences where Trump just kept tripping up. Maybe not in an objective way, but certainly in a way that the media would pounce on. This injecting bleach and all this kind of stuff, which doesn't happen if you don't stand on the podium for 2 or 3 hours a day, just babbling on about stuff. You're going to say stupid stuff. It's just normal, right? So just don't do it. Let the doctors talk.
A medical thing. Yeah, exactly.
So, and Barr says he told Trump many times, just get off the podiums, let the doctors talk, let it, don't tie yourself to that, because if it goes bad, it's going to be you who's going to be blamed for it all. Just don't do that. And then just Trump never listened. So he definitely turned on Trump. And at some point, I think he just didn't care anymore. This guy's hopeless. He's incorrigible. I don't care. But that all said, and I don't begrudge any of that, but I think he should have just at some point said, I'm done here. Just resign. I've gotten rid of Mueller. That was my task. I'm done here. You choose whoever you want. And he didn't do that. He hung around to the end. And I completely agree. He was very obstructionist. I mean, the Hunter Biden thing, Barr had a duty to come out and say, no. This what all these people are saying about Russian disinformation is not true. We have the laptop. It's real. He had a duty to say that. I mean, even Comey said something like that in 2016.
Maybe to broaden it out, and if you don't want to talk about it, it's okay. But what direction is the Hunter Biden laptop story going, in your opinion?
Well, I think it was the whole investigation only took place to cover up for the Bidens rather than investigate the Bidens. That's the whole point. Because as long as this investigation is going on, it's been going on for years. Well, the government can always say, the bureaucrats can always say, the deep state can always say, oh, we're investigating. Can't comment. It's under investigation, So I think he'd probably get a slap on the wrist for some tax evasion or whatever, and then that's it.
Well, you're the lawyer. I mean, I've come across the commentary that they can come to adjudicate some kind of finality to it, and then they seal it. They seal the file. Is that legally? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, of course. That's right.
Okay, great.
You prosecute him, but you do it in a way where all these files are sealed for some reason or another, and then you're done. And then Congress might try and do some investigation or whatever. If there's a new DOJ, they might try and reopen. I mean, this is all possible. But DC being what it is, people just say, okay, let's move on here, which would be a real tragedy because that laptop really is full of incriminating evidence. And again, they've had it since 2019. I mean, how long do you need to investigate these things?
Yeah, but Miranda Devine over at the New York Post, I mean, I guess Ted Cruz needs to talk to her more because nobody in the FBI wants to say anything. I mean, I remember, Rahe was asked, does the FBI have the laptop? And he wouldn't even answer that question. Yeah, it's extraordinary. But I mean, I think that the Republicans could be far more clever given the information that's made public already, and quite a bit of it already has been. And to use that, okay, and even if it has to be behind closed doors, say, can you confirm or deny this, okay? Because a lot of that information is publicly known now.
Well, or how many times did Donald Trump Jr. have to testify? They kept calling him back, especially this Barr character who's supposedly a Republican. He just kept harassing Trump Jr. So if they're empowered, do it to Biden Jr. And then get him in a perjury trap. okay, if we're not going to get him on the laptop, if everything is sealed, if everything is investigated, if the FBI, tied it all up, whatever, then get him on a perjury trap.
Right. But of course, you
bring
need
him in 5-6 times and get him to contradict himself, or just do something. I mean, the Democrats always come at you from all angles and have all these cunning plans and so on. And the Republicans don't seem to do any of those things.
Softly and say, okay, oh, we'll come back later. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Right. But of course, you need both, because if you're going to do the perjury trap, then you need to control both Congress and you need to control the DOJ, because otherwise, then when they try to get, hey, Eric Holder is ignoring our subpoena, criminal referral. Well, it's the Obama Justice Department. They're not going to go after Eric Holder, so it's a waste of time. Of course, when you control both, as in the case of Biden, then they can go after Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. Oh, they ignoring congressional subpoenas. That's a criminal matter. Boom, leg irons. So you have to control all of them.
You're absolutely right, but it doesn't need to be at the same time. So if they can get Hunter to lie in 2023, then a future AG can do something about it in 2025, because you got this 5-year time period in which you can charge. So I wouldn't wait. That's basically the answer.
Right. So one other case. Do you have any thoughts on the Steve Bannon business? The New York State now reopening the case.
Only that it was inevitable. I mean, Trump can only pardon federal issues, federal crimes. He has no authority over states. And this is one of these cases where if it took place in New York, it could be both federal, it could be local or state. And that's what's happening. It's just, I think it's the same again, like with Trump. They were going to get him anyway there's nothing you can do about it. They're just going to go after him and go and get him. I thought he already, just my personal view is that he shouldn't have played games with the subpoena, the congressional subpoena for which he got indicted a couple of months ago. I just didn't think that was a hill to die on. Just go there and just plead the fifth, like what other people did, and just walk out and just don't give them the ammunition, because he knew this other issue was going to come. So this other issue has to do with some fundraising. There was a fundraising effort going on to build part of the wall privately. And so now it's being alleged that Bannon and his co-conspirator alleged defrauded the people who provided the money, even though the people who had provided the money never complained. So it's just, it's very messy. I mean, with any of these kinds of so-called charitable efforts, it can get so messy in terms of tracing the money and what happened with the money and who took how much and so on. So with some people, they just let it go, and with other people, they pursue you. And it was always a given that they were going to pursue Bannon. And there's really no one that can help him now. I mean, the governor of New York, Katie Hochul, she's not going to help him. The courts there are probably not going to help him. The juries there are not going to help him. So it just comes down to having better lawyers than Trump has.
Right. I don't believe, I don't believe for one moment that he had any intention to bilk anyone out of any money. I mean, it's just, he has money. This is an issue that he cares a lot about, the wall and everything. So the idea that he set up the scheme in order to line his pockets, I just think that it's wholly unbelievable.
I agree with George. I just can't imagine in a million years that he's doing the minutia of the paperwork and all of that. I just can't see it. I mean, we've seen enough of him. He just kind of delegates around, okay? And he is a force of nature. If we can finish up, I want to ask you a political question that has legal implications. Given the situation around Trump and this document dispute, wouldn't it be in his best interest to declare himself as a candidate for president?
I mean, legally, there's no, that doesn't stop anything from happening. There are these DOJ guidelines that say if you're a candidate, then they can't, or they shouldn't come after you within so and so many days and so on. But I think that can even be overruled by first of all, it's just internal guidelines. Second of all, the Attorney General can overrule it anyway. So I don't think legally, it's neither here nor there legally. I mean, if I was Trump or advising him, and if I had to gauge what are we going to do here, what's the best thing to do here, just forget the legal part. It's just neither here nor there. Just think of it politically. Does it help you politically or not, or whatever? I think and for that, my answer would be, well, it depends on how Republicans do in November. If they're going to do extremely well and he's already declared, that's great for him. But if he's already declared and then they underperform, then he's going to get blamed. So that's the calculus here. And I think that's why he's waiting, because recently it like looked at it as if they were going to do really well, but now it kind of looks like, well, maybe not, especially in the Senate. They might not have the best candidates, or, you know, the candidates are underperforming or whatever. So, but that is one thing I think Trump is pretty good at. I mean, I mentioned a lot of things he's not good at, like choosing lawyers and details and so on, but I think he's good at gauging, you know, how are they going to do in November? And I have a feeling that if he thinks, okay, this is going to go well, he's going to kind of jump in the race to take, you know, all the kudos for that, or not, depending on how he feels in terms of how they're going to do. But yeah, I think that's the only calculus here. Forget about the legal stuff. It's irrelevant.
I really would like to pick your legal mind here. What happens if they do indict Trump? What then? What happens then?
Well, he'll probably be bailed. He'll be let out.
I mean, like in terms of his political, like he continues to campaign as if nothing has happened. Yeah,
I mean, he can.
Well,
look at Bannon. I mean, Bannon is still doing all the. He's still got his show. He's still doing all this. It would just be. He's a private person who can just continue doing whatever he was going to do anyway.
Yeah, okay, let me follow up on that and say, okay, you'd say he's indicted. He goes to trial and he's convicted. Does he go to jail?
Probably not, for if we're talking about for the sort of things we were talking about. You know, the lawyer lied on the certification or whatever. But it's possible. I mean,
or maybe this is the gambit, just very much like the Mueller investigation. Just let it run and run and run and run. I mean, it's investigation for investigation's sake, not necessarily for an end game goal.
Yeah, and I think Democrats have a dilemma there. It's like impeachment. Remember, they talked about impeachment for 4 years, and it was very helpful because they just, as you said, you kept running and running, and you could always kind of hang it around his neck and so on. And then they pulled the trigger. I think they pulled the trigger because they needed to protect Joe Biden from all this Ukraine stuff. So you blame Trump for that. But yeah, I mean, personally, I think it would be better if they didn't pull the trigger, not because of Trump, but just for their own political sort of ambitions. But maybe they'll get impatient and pull the trigger. I don't know.
You would think that they're going to impeach him a third time, because of course, it depends on whether the Democrats control the House of Representatives, because of course, if they don't control, then obviously the Republicans aren't going to move to impeach. But if they do have control, then if he's been convicted, they're going to use that. Hey, we should impeach him a third time, even if we don't convict him. You know, we're going to impeach him. And there's always a few Republicans that are going to go.
If there's no conviction, George, then he would run anyway.
Right, but I mean, yeah.
Another feather in his hat, third time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he'll convict him, but there'll always be a few Republicans. I mean, the Republicans, you know, they're a fairly pathetic lot. The Democrats absolutely solid, 100%. Not one. They're not going to lose a single vote. But there's always going to be a few Republican stragglers, you know, all the Mitt Romney types who are going to convict him. So, you know, so it'll be a third impeachment.
Yeah, that's possible. But I think they've gone down this criminal lane for the past 6 months or so, and so intensively that I think that's where it's heading. I think they decided we're going to move away from impeachment into that lane. And then, of course, if they keep pursuing that, you got Biden and his pardon. I mean, Biden can preemptively pardon. Or the day he's indicted, Biden can say, oh, we don't really want that in our country, and I'm such a unifier, I'm going to pardon him preemptively. And then Trump gets to accept or not accept. So he gets to choose.
That's really interesting. You
can build a lot of drama around that.
So what do you mean? I mean, if Trump accepts the pardon, then he doesn't run for office again? Or what do you mean?
No. Okay. So Biden could pardon him today if he wanted to for future, you know, just in case he gets indicted in the future. Basically what happened with Nixon. But I don't think he would do that. But let's say Trump is indicted. Biden might come out the day after the indictment, before a trial, before a conviction, before anything, and just sort of preemptively say, we don't want ex-presidents in this country to go through this process, even if they're very bad people, blah, blah, blah. I'm such a great unifier, here's your pardon. If that happens, Trump gets to decide whether he accepts the pardon or not. If Trump were to accept the pardon, sure, I mean, he can run. I mean, he'd be like scot-free, but of course he'd be so damaged accepting a pardon from Biden that wouldn't fly. So Trump would likely not accept a pardon. No, I don't want a pardon. I didn't do anything wrong. And then the thing just keeps going, and a lot of drama, and we'll go through the courts. And there's another issue here, of course, is that, which hasn't been talked about much, all of these cases, whether it's the special master one or the warrant. I mean, Trump hasn't challenged the warrant yet. I don't understand that. You challenged the warrant. The warrant was overbroad. Like as Peter said earlier, take any boxes that are near other boxes, and take anything you want, basically. So hasn't challenged it. Why? I don't know. Anyway, if he does challenge special master, if he is indicted, anything at all of these cases are bound to end up in the Supreme Court one day. And that will be extremely interesting, because that's sort of perhaps the only institutions where Republicans still have a little bit of say as to how things turn out. So I think there's just, the short of it is, I think there's too many data points, too many variables to really know what might happen.
Well, we never know with the Supreme Court justices. They haven't ruled particularly on Trump's side on many issues, even with these three justices that he got on the courts. I mean, obviously on the election lawsuit, they didn't vote for on Trump's side. And then in all these issues about the congressional subpoenas and the New York Attorney General subpoenas, again, they consistently voted against Trump. So I wouldn't count on the Supreme Court coming down on Trump's side.
You know what I would count on, George? If our guest here were a legal advisor to the Trump people would be doing a whole lot better, because I've learned so much from our conversation here. Fascinating, because George and I have kicked this back and forth, and you've clarified a lot of things, and I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Peter. There are a lot of people out there who, a lot of lawyers who I know, and who are much closer to this kind of election law and these criminal law and all these things, would be fantastic. But, for some reason, they never end up in Trump's orbit. Just,
right.
I don't.
Yeah, it's very odd. You think he'd have, the top class lawyers, the best lawyers in the country. I mean, he has the money, he'd hire the best, but he's pretty girls, and that just seemed very odd that they're his lawyers.
Hans, one of the things I've learned from our conversation, obviously, to keep up with political news, I watch Fox Primetime, and I feel that they've been a disservice to their viewers, because you've given so much more clarity and kind of forensically investigating the legal case, the legal theory of the Trump people. Because they never for a second give their viewers the shadow of a doubt that they're not doing the right thing for the former president. You are, and that's what's worth listening to. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes you need to, the bad news is the important news, because you can sort of act accordingly. And if I were to sum up what we've talked about, the bad news is that the grand jury subpoena was not complied with, in a nutshell. And you can twist it or turn it any which way you want, but it was not complied with. It said, we returned everything that's marked classified, and that is just clearly not the case. That did not happen. And that's a huge problem. And we talked about, is it the lawyer's problem? Is the lawyer going to blame other people? Is the lawyer going to blame? We don't know how it's going to pan out. But the core of it is that's the problem, and that's what DOJ is after. And all this other stuff is just a smokescreen.
It's been mentioned that, again, this lack of clarity when the raid on Mar-a-Lago was going on. Staff at the residence were told to turn off the surveillance cameras, but it seems kind of murky. Did they actually do that, or were there other cameras on? Have you heard anything about that?
The Trump lawyers do make that allegations in one of their recent filings. So apparently they would have some evidence for that happened, but they denied it. They said, no, we're not going to turn it off.
So what happened? That they kept the surveillance camera going, or that they turned it off?
Right. So according to Trump's lawyers, and FBI raid team asked them to switch off the surveillance cameras. The Mar-a-Lago staff said no, and that was it. So the cameras kept running.
Okay.
And Trump said he was, I think he was like kind of dangling that he would release the tapes, but you know, that hasn't happened. Maybe he's waiting for the right time or whatever. I don't think we could see much on the tapes anyway, you know.
Well, you might see them laying out the documents on the floor. You know,
Yeah.
Trump's a germophile. You know, I can't imagine he would let anything on the floor. Okay, he's a neat freak. Okay, yeah. I couldn't imagine that.
Just going back on the Mar-a-Lago raid, do you expect the appeals court to uphold the government's motion?
Well, the government hasn't triggered it yet. They're basically threatening it. They're saying, if you don't allow us to continue our investigation based on this labeled classified stuff, forget about all the other stuff. We don't care about, you know, presidential records, where only the labeled classified stuff. If you don't allow us to continue, then we will appeal. That's what it says. And then they set the court a deadline, which is sort of, you know, quite rude in a way. But well, I think the judge will just tell them, just forget about it. And then they can try and appeal. I don't think the appeals court will overrule the judge. They'll just let the judge will just, first of all, there's very limited grounds for overruling the judge in the first place in terms of I'm not talking about the actual substance of the case. You know, just in terms of the legal reference, in terms of the reasons that you may overrule a judge for, and that's very, very limited. It's sort of conflicted and just a few other things. So, I think they'll just let the judge get on with it. Again, it's really not a big deal. I don't understand why everyone's making such a huge deal about the special master. I mean, as we discussed, it's just the person only has really one job. It's like when we cannot trust the DOJ to do things properly for whatever reason. So because you raided the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Okay, so let's make sure that everything's done properly by bringing in an independent person who looks at everything that was raided and says the government can have this and they cannot have that. That's it. That's the only, and plus that person doesn't make the decision. The person just makes a recommendation and then the judge makes a decision. So I just don't understand what the big deal is in terms of why didn't they just do it in the first place? Yeah, of course that then seeds conspiracy theories. Oh, because they planted documents and so on. Yeah, I don't believe that. But at the same time, I don't understand why.
People like Mike Davis say it's because this is Crossfire Hurricane documents. That's the issue. Yeah,
they clearly do not want the special master to look at anything that's labeled classified, because they want to carve that, as you know, as we discussed, they want to kind of carve that out and get on with that. But the point of a special master is to do the carving out, to do the separating. It's that person's job. It's not, the DOJ can't like pre-separate and say, okay, special master, you can look at this lot over here, but not, that's the special master job is to look at everything because we cannot trust the DOJ because of conflicts which clearly exist here, whichever way you want to turn it.
They'll never say it out loud, but you know, you can do all the separating you want. We want indictment, okay? That's essentially the message they're sending, okay? You can separate them in any kind of box you want, but we want enough for an indictment, and I think it's coming.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think the special master is going to prevent that from happening, because the special master in all likelihood will say, well, these 100 documents, I'm not here, I cannot judge whether they're actually classified or not, but that's not my job. All I have to say is whether these documents are marked classified. Yeah, these 100 are marked classified, so you can have them. There you go. I just don't see any other outcome, which of course is what the FBI wants, because they want these 100 documents so that they can pursue these obstruction charges. You know, I don't understand what the big deal is. I really don't, as far as the special master is concerned. And as I said, what Trump's lawyers really ought to be doing is trying to get the warrant invalidated. The warrant, that's it. Because once the warrant is invalidated, then everything has to be returned, and they can't use anything.
And what's your theory as to why they're not pursuing that issue?
Competence? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, I keep scratching my head. Why? Just that certification. Why would anyone sign that piece of paper? I don't know. I mean, you can come up with all kinds of theories as to how this is 48D chess and how this is so smart or whatever. Or maybe it's just incompetence.
Yeah, or maybe just Trump, you know, because of all of the conspiracy theories around the JFK assassination, decided to take the last 19 pages just for himself as a keepsake. I mean, I personally think it gets down to something like that. Okay, personally, I mean, I was making a joke right there, but you've done a really good job of explaining things that my news consumption doesn't like to touch upon because they're partisan on Trump's side. Okay. And so we got some really down the middle here. I mean, you were even suggesting what the DOJ could do and what the other side can do. That's thinking in a legal way.
That's right. Anyway, Hans, thank you so much for once again giving us your time. We really appreciate it and look forward to meeting and talking again very soon. So
yeah, look forward to it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.